And I personally am very excited for this session. We're going to be talking about public benefits of investing in the railroad right-of-way. Three seemingly unrelated topics we're going to combine. It should be a really great session, and I think it gets to the heart of public-private partnerships on railroads, especially the public benefit part of public-private partnerships. So I will have our moderator introduce the session in just a moment as folks get settled at their tables. And I'll first introduce our moderator, Representative Andrew Barkis, represents the 2nd Legislative District in Washington. If you're not familiar, this is Chehalis, Centralia, all the way south to... No, it's not. He's from Chehalis.
I am. It's Thurston Pierce County.
He represents Thurston Pierce County. Apologies. Represents also Chehalis as a person, not as a representative. Forever. He's been serving in the House of Representatives since 2016. He's ranking minority chair of the House Transportation Committee and is one of the state's transportation budget leaders. He's a champion for fiscal responsibility, sensible reform, and reprioritization. So his goals are to keep costs down, stop forced taxes on drivers, and complete projects with existing state revenue. We're excited to have him here to talk about some of these projects that are integral to advancing our regional infrastructure and also to expanding the benefits that we can afford to the public sector through rail projects. Representative Barkis, please.
Thanks, Tom. Well, good morning, everybody. I hope everybody had a good break, got your coffee, all your stuff going on. So this is going to be a really cool panel. It's a little different than what we just did as far as going through the questions and answers. We're going to save the questions because we have a panel of experts, right? You guys are all experts. At least that's what they said to tell you right here. So we have a panel that's going to talk about some very interesting things. And Tom, when we had this meeting before with Bruce and others in Pemoir, he brought this subject up and said, this is kind of the most exciting thing that's happening right now, is how do we maximize the use of our rail network, our right-of-ways, et cetera, infrastructure. But then all of a sudden we started talking about other things like invasive species, salmon recovery, all these other things that are integral to our rail networks throughout our state and throughout our nation. So without further ado, we're going to go into this. I'm going to introduce the panel. The panel is going to each have some time to present on their topics. We're going to watch the time very carefully, especially my invasive species folks, because we have two here, three, and one online that we're going to have join us. So we're going to have to be really careful on this because we do want to allow for some time at the end for questions if we can get to that point. So, okay, public benefits expanding through rail partnerships. On the stage, we have Jeff Swanson. Jeff is with BNSF. He's the Director of Engineering Services. Thank you for being here with us today to talk. We also have Sven, last name, Sven. Everybody, Sven. Thank you very much. It's always a challenge as a moderator is making sure you don't mess up somebody's last name. Sven is with the Washington State Department of Agriculture, Pest Program Manager, and the State Plant Regulatory Official. We also have Kress here from the Oregon Department of Agriculture, Plant Protection and Conservation Division Director of State Plant Regulatory Official. It's a huge title. And then Joshua is not, Cody is here instead of Joshua, right? Okay. Cody is here. Cody is with Oregon. Okay, not on the sheet, but he is with us today too. Thank you for being here. And then remotely, we're going to have Matt Walicki, who is the AECOM Vice President of Transportation, U.S. Director of Freight Rail, is going to talk about some really incredible things that they're doing as far as infrastructure. Okay, you guys ready? Okay, here we go. So first up, we are going to have Jeff Swanson present a little bit about what BNSF is doing with salmon passage culvert recovery along their network here in the Pacific Northwest.
Thank you, Representative Barkis. I'll go ahead and go to the next one there. I guess I do that, don't I? Okay, thought I'd show this slide just for those who do not know much about BNSF Railway. We do operate in 28 states, 3 Canadian provinces. We have 32,500 miles of track and have over 36,000 employees. So we continuously work to preserve wildlife habitat along our network. Whether it's the Arroyo toad providing conservation funding to secure high quality habitat, the bighorn sheep in New Mexico building fences and bridges to keep them off the track, grizzly bears in Montana partnering with the fed, state, and tribal agencies, black-footed ferrets also in Montana supporting their reintroduction, the osprey in Washington trying to get them off our bridges and our towers. It's a big win when we can do that. They are, I don't know if you guys are too familiar with osprey. You walk under one of their nests, they will attack you. And we've actually had some injuries from that. So it's good that we're doing that. And then the killer whale program, sponsored or partnered with the Navy, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and NOAA on a grant that will monitor the health of the southern resident killer whales in Washington. Then the one I'll be focused on today is fish passage and partnering with tribes and agencies on opportunities that will improve and restore fish passage. It's important to note it is a partnership. BNSF cannot do this on our own. Different agencies we partnered with is tribal governments, state, county, local agencies, and environmental groups. Currently at this time, I have worked with 13 different tribes, 12 in Washington. Recently took a boat trip up the Kootenai River with the Kootenai tribe, the Kootenai tribe of Idaho. So starting to work outside of Washington now. So how do we prioritize fish passage? BNSF Railway does not. We leave that to the professionals. Mainly, we like partnering with the tribes. They know where those priorities culvert locations are. We will oversee the design, the permitting, and the construction of the projects. So how do we get these projects funded? We're working through grants. Our funding is grants on these. Whether it's FHWA, the Aquatic Organism Passage Grant that was sponsored by Senator Cantwell, that was a $200 million grant for 5 years. So a total of $1 billion that was available for aquatic organism passage. NOAA grants, fish passage, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, others if available. One that we recently just applied for with the Nisqually tribe as a partner was the RTA grant, so Rural Tribal Assistance. So we just submitted that grant last year for a location. We need a partner in this. We cannot apply for grants ourselves as a private company, so we need to have a partner to make this work. Let's see, it might be the old presentation maybe still, but we'll make this one work. Fish passage projects currently funded. We have 16 locations where we'll construct 22 bridges. Currently allocated $25 million, and these are funded projects. We look to start construction in 2026. We're currently working on the design, permitting now. Some of them are already 100% design. Others are 30 to 90. I will say the permitting process has went a lot better than expected. NOAA has been really instrumental in making the permits work for these projects. Our partners, Cowlitz Tribe, Tulalip Tribes, Nooksack Tribe, Puyallup Tribe, City of Arlington, and City of Bellingham. So these are projects that we have submitted for funding. The previous slide is ones that we have funding for already. So we submitted for 20 locations. That would be to construct 31 bridges. And the reason there's a discrepancy in the 20 and 31 is Some locations have more than one track, so we will build more than one bridge. Two of them we put in for design only due to the complexity of the project. And our funding source on those is FHWA, NOAA, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and DOT. And we partnered with 6 tribes on these projects. Some design examples. The next few slides will be some design examples. This is a Fish Creek near Arlington, Washington. Currently have a 5-foot arch culvert there. We'll be replacing that with a 84-foot bridge. This is on a single track location. We partnered with the Tulalip tribes on this and were awarded a NOAA Fish Passage grant. We project this project will take us 30 days to construct. And these projects will be steel piling with concrete spans, ballast deck. This is an example, Squally Creek, similar to the previous bridge, replacing culverts, 2 culverts with a 72-foot long bridge. This is on 2 main tracks, so bridge adjacent to each other. We partnered with the Puyallup tribe. This is a AOP grant, Aquatic Organism Passage. We project 45 days to construct this. Interesting note on this, by this location, we have 4 projects that are currently funded within 4 miles of each other, all partnering with the Puyallup tribes. All will be constructed in 2026. Another project, they start getting a little more complicated, complexity on construction. This is Indian Mary near Skamania. This is a 2-track location. We have main track and siding track. Currently have a 30-inch culvert there. We'll be replacing that with a 90-foot bridge. Obviously a high fill location. We're expecting 60 days to complete. We will have this project done July of August of 2026. And Cowlitz Tribe was our partner on that. Then they start getting into real complicated projects where we need multiple partners. The other ones we partnered with just the tribes. This one is multiple partners. When I first went out to this site with the Yakima Nation, I looked at it and I was like, we cannot do this one alone. We need WashDOT also involved in this project. Our tracks run parallel to Highway 14. Our right-of-ways, our center of track to the edge of roadway is 40 feet. We cannot do this project without WashDOT. Reaching out to WashDOT, this was not on one of their higher priority lists. So I'm having calls, working with the Yakima Nation, Eastern Klickitat County Conservation District. We came together and thought, well, let's make this one happen. So we put in for a design grant through AOP FHWA. So the interesting fact on this, if you guys haven't read it yet, this will open up 78 miles of stream, 4.5 miles of designated critical habitat, 26,895 square meters of spawning area, 490,830 square meters of rearing area. This is Yakima Nation's #1 project they have on the lower Columbia River. So this one will be an important one to do. And doing some research on this location, I found old files back when the John Day locks were going to be built that the original plan was to have bridges here. So I'm sure it was a funding issue. We can put culverts in, it'll be cheaper. So that's probably why there's culverts, but we are looking at going to a bridge here. You can see we're currently at 30% design on the BNSF bridge. The Highway 14 is just a conceptual right now. This slide just shows a majority of our projects we will do from the track. It'll be a limited environmental impact. We won't have to build access roads and all that to get cranes in. We can do our pile driving, setting our spans, everything by locomotive crane that's rail bound. And then we also have high rail excavators. I wanted to highlight this project. It shows how coming together and partnering with multiple agencies, tribes, how this can work. This project is in Meadowdale. This project has won 6 awards, local, state, and national awards. This bridge was completed in 2022. And if you're not familiar with Meadowdale Park, really the estuary was never there. So this restores that restored the estuary back prior to when the railroads came through. Just think 100 years ago that this was blocked off by culverts. So in 2022, this bridge was completed. 2023 went out there with NOAA, and it was good that they were there, their directors, because salmon were already using it. So it just goes to show how opening these locations up, how quick the salmon return. This was also a safety play. You can see on the left side, or the right picture, on the left side there's people walking. We also made a pedestrian walkway under the bridge. So prior to that, people would be walking through that culvert to get beach access. And if the water was too high, they would then walk over the top of our tracks, which caused a safety issue. So this was a win-win project. So we just do not work on fish passage, go after grants for fish. We have a grants team led by Critica, who's here today. This shows that since 2019 to 2025, we have been a partner on 57 grants and won $518 million of grants. So it does pay to work with BNSF Railway. I'm not the expert at this slide. Critica is over there, but I would encourage you to go to bnsf.com, select in the community, and then select public projects and public infrastructure and investments. There's a lot of good information on there on who to contact if you have a project near or on the right of way, and seek us out. We may be able to help you. We do realize that some agencies do not have the resources available for grant writing. We will do as much as we can to support you. An example is that with some of the tribes that I'm working with, they do not have the resources to write a grant. We have written a lot of the grants for the tribes to the point where all they have to do is review it, upload it, hit the submit button. And I will tell you, we are 100% on the grants we have written for the tribes. So reach out to us. You can see we do strategic planning, letters of support, grant application authoring, community outreach, benefit cost analysis, and grant administration. And that is it.
Thank you, JF. So remember, if you have questions at the end, we're going to have some time for questions for our panelists and their presentation. A lot of information unpacked there, Jeff, and we really appreciate that. Sven, come on up. Now we're going to shift gears a little bit from fish, culverts, and projects to scary bugs that are doing damage to our agricultural crops and how we're fighting them. There you go, Sven.
All right, so good morning. My name's Sven Spichiger. I'm the state plant regulatory official for the state of Washington and also the pest program manager. But in a former life, before I retired and moved west, I did the same thing back in Pennsylvania. And one day in 2014, I got an email with a picture of this beautiful bug from an off-duty game commission officer who said, "This is ruining my tree of heaven." And here we are just 11 years later, and this insect is sweeping through the country and causing a lot of damage. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, what Washington is doing about it, how you can help. And then my colleagues from Oregon and California, who also have a vested interest in keeping this insect out, will tell you what they're doing. So first of all, what is it? It's a plant hopper. It's not a moth. It's not a butterfly. It's really pretty, but it's in the family Fulgoridae, and there's about 700 species of these in the world. And its name, I like to call it Lycorma delicatula, but you can call it spotted lanternfly. There are only 17 species in the United States, most of them in the Pacific Southwest. And now we have one which is sweeping across the country. And you can kind of see they normally don't cause problems. I'd like to go over the life cycle for you because that's kind of important. And I'd like to start where we are. It's October. They've started laying eggs, and egg masses are pretty important for spotted lanternfly. Right now, they will lay egg masses in rows of 30 to 50 eggs, and you can see that kind of on the right-hand portion of the slide there in the lower area. They will then cover them with a waxy substance, which looks white or pale gray when it first starts, but then it dries, and it really just looks like a splash of mud. So it's really, really forgivable that these ended up here in the United States, because no inspector would look at a splash of mud on a piece of stone or something and think, hey, maybe this is something I should have stopped at the border. It's easy to miss these. Oops, sorry. We'll keep going here. This is how they'll spend the winter. Around the end of April into May, they will hatch out. And most people who encounter these for the first time say it looks like a tiny little tick with white spots. And they do. And their main mode of transportation is to crawl or hop around. And you can see on the lower portion of the life cycle that they do. They kind of look like a small black tick. There are 4 larval instars, and the 4th one, which happens towards the end of summer, starts developing bright red patches. And then on the last molt, they will come out as an adult. The adults will mate, and then they will lay eggs again, and the whole thing starts over. Adults don't last forever. They die usually with the first frost. So spotted lanternfly uses a piercing, sucking mouth part to remove fluids directly from the plant that it's feeding on. This feeding can cause injury that leads to diseases and other things. It also leads to flows of sap coming out of trees, and it also leads to loss of vigor and sometimes mortality of the plant. It feeds on almost anything. It's not too preferential when it's young, but even though it feeds on over 70 different species that we have here in the United States, it prefers another invasive species called tree of heaven more than anything else. And you can see it's in most states in the United States. The damage, unfortunately, is to some very important crops to us. Things like grapes, hops, orchard trees, nursery stock. Oregon's much more important for nursery stock than Washington, but we kind of win with apples, cherries, and grapes and hops. And for those of you who don't know, Washington produces 38% of all the hops in the world. And so it's a pretty big and important crop. And if you like to drink beer, it's probably important to you. So what ends up happening after they feed on the plant itself is they will eject waste, and this waste is a clear substance called honeydew. And you can see the wet streak running down the grape leaf there. This eventually will develop sooty mold, and this blocks photosynthesis, leads to dieback, and causes the plants to die. The third photo I have here is wet hops in Pennsylvania, and I had a hops extension entomologist with me, and he said, we're not going to be able to sell those because they're covered in sugar water. They're going to have to do a lot of extra cleaning to make that a saleable crop. This could be a disaster. And so obviously the West Coast is a little worried. My colleagues in California lead the nation in grape production, and it's not by a small amount. They have a very important grape industry, but Washington is second. And so we're a little concerned with this one. I'd like to just show you some feeding, and be patient with this. And I wish I had a laser pointer, but you're going to start seeing what looks like rain coming down on the left-hand side of the screen. And then there's one kind of sitting in the middle of the screen to the left, and she's going to start shooting out honeydew. And this is what is a real problem. And there it goes. You can see it just keeps going and going. And one of the most amusing things I got to experience when we were training the rest of the nation is I had a group of people standing under a tree that was being fed on, and they all needed a shower afterward because they were completely coated in honeydew from the feeding by the insects. So those of you who don't know anything about grape production, things you can't do right before harvest is add insecticides or have contaminants in them. And so this insect is a real super huge threat to the grape industry. So we'll go ahead and move along. And I'm from Washington, so we actually care about apples a little bit. And the first record we got on apples was actually on September 12th, 2017. And I can tell you, I had actually called them on September 11th to say, hey, how are things going? Does your crop look good this year? And the next day they encountered this. And this is pretty amazing. Now, they are doing a little bit of feeding, but this is a migratory thing. And what ended up happening here is this harvest ended up getting rejected because of so many dead adults that had gotten into the apple crates. And you can see, I mean, just ridiculous. And the best story I have is we were talking to a county commissioner. He was giving a political stump speech, angry that this happened, and he was interrupted because one had crawled so far up his pant leg that he had to stop and dance it out. And so, you know, what I'm telling you is these things can get out of control in a really big hurry, and we don't have them here yet, which is kind of nice. The last impact is one that shouldn't really be overlooked. I'm talking about crops and things that we care about, but what if you have a backyard tree, and this is just a cherry tree, and there are thousands of spotted lanternflies on this, but look around it. Your children are playing under this. There's a swing there. You may have a grill out there. You might park a car under a tree. And every time they're shooting out honeydew, that honeydew is eventually developing sooty mold or other fungal pathogens or things like that. This becomes a real problem for homeowners. And you know what they do? They call politicians. They call me. So when this gets to your state and it gets out of control, a lot of you folks in this room are going to hear about this pest, whether you want to or not. And so this really can be a quality of life issue, and it got so bad that Saturday Night Live even did a comical skit once these things finally hit New York City, because they were so numerous that people couldn't help but notice them. So how did it get here and how does it spread? Well, every life stage of this pest is a hitchhiker. So I have immatures on a horse trailer. I have an adult on, unfortunately, a truck that was parked under an infested tree from one of my staff members, and they left the window open. So you can imagine a pregnant female spotted lanternfly lands on that truck, crawls inside. They drive 20 miles down the road. She gets out. You have a new population just like that. They also lay egg masses on everything that's outside. So picnic tables, trash, kids' playthings. Real important, rusted metal. So there's plenty of egg masses on that rusty barrel there, but if you look on the inside, there's twice as many. Also, if you look in the foreground, that piece of wood, once I turned it over, also had several egg masses on it. And this is rusty metal, unfortunately, is one of the preferred substances that they like to lay egg masses on. We believe that it first arrived in the United States on stone. I mentioned that I got the first call on this. I took my lab, we headed down. It was a guy's house in the middle of nowhere. I'm spinning my head around saying, how did something from China get into the middle of rural Berks County, Pennsylvania? And then he informs me there's a quarry down the road and I think they do imports. Sure enough, we get down there, we check the imported stone from China, and there are egg masses on it. And so we'll never know for sure if that's how it got here, but I got to tell you, that was the largest population I encountered at the time. And so these were imported. And if you look at it, does it really look like a serious pest in that photograph? It doesn't. It's forgivable that they missed that. Where is it now? Now it's established in 18 different states, and you can see we're as far as Chicago, and that's the one that really worries us, and there's great reasons for that. We also have interceptions in several other states. Now, what does it have to do with the rail industry? Why am I at this conference talking about it? I already mentioned rusty metal. I'm going to mention its favorite host plant, which is Tree of Heaven. I think I talked about that already. And in this photo, you see a microcosm of central Pennsylvania. Rusty metal cars with open tops sitting next to Tree of Heaven on a track. And who knows where they're going to be the next day. And so if you have a car sitting there at the right time of year, the wind kicks up, you might get pregnant females in the car itself. They will certainly lay egg masses on it if it sits for more than an hour. And that leads to bad things. And so what I'm showing you now is a fairly new map produced by the federal government. And they said I could share this. It even has the 2 new detections in South Carolina. And we have the rail system laid over top of where our positives are. And you can see they match up really well. Now, this is not the only industry that moves spotted lanternfly around, but it's one based on the way we operate that is definitely a risk for moving this further than it needs to go as fast as it's going. And you can see all of these new hotspots and remote locations from Pennsylvania where it was first introduced are right along our rail corridors. I'm going to drill down just a little more. This is going back to 2018 when it started marching across Pennsylvania. And you can see one of our first hits outside of the general infested area was in Altoona. The red dots represent positives. That's on a rail depot. Just south of Pittsburgh, same thing, rail depot. The newest one when I left Pennsylvania, Beaver County, again, right on a depot. And so it's not that rail's bad or anything, we need it. I mean, for heaven's sakes, you move tons of freight with just a few gallons of fuel. I mean, it's a wonderful system, but it also presents a risk. And here's the real risk to the West Coast is that if you start here in Pennsylvania, according to this map, in a week's time, I can be all the way over to Spokane. And I know it's not that simple. There's a lot of intricacies with it, but the risk and the pathway is definitely there. And so one of the things Washington did when I moved here is we started developing an action plan. And that's to help respond to the pest before it gets here, to make it a less hospitable place for spotted lanternfly to live, and also what to do when it arrives. So part of the plan, my organization, Washington State Department of Agriculture, we wanted to identify the key impacted industries, and I'll go over that in a slide. We wanted to survey the preferred host, which is Tree of Heaven, to see if we really had a host that it could live on. We wanted to do a detection survey for the lanternfly to make sure it wasn't here. And of course, we wanted to do education for pathway industries. And the rail industry is one of those pathway industries, which is why we're here talking to you today. And I just want to share this with you. So grape, we're looking at 284 million a year, and that's in the purple on this map. Hops, 320 million a year. And I mentioned it's like 38% of the world market. Berries, a lot of folks don't know this, 153 million. Washington does a lot there. We do sell some apples, 2 billion, and cherries are actually fairly important. I believe we lead the nation in that one, and that's 435 million. And you can see sort of where all these are, and I have my GIS guy put our rail lines over top. So that's our ag production. If you go to this map, you can see once we've started doing survey to look for the preferred host, this is also where Tree of Heaven is in the state. So you can see we have a couple of key areas, and we've been watching them close. We're going to do the best we can to do our part of it. But we're falling short in a few areas. I'd like to see more effort out in the Spokane area because we believe that's where it will probably pop up first. But reality is we get our workers where you see the dots. And then last but not least, this is the survey work we've been doing, and you can see these are all negative dots, and we even have some trapping that we've introduced now, but the traps are only minimally effective. We have to rely on visual survey. And so what can you guys do to help with this? Because it's really not the Department of Agriculture's problem. It's not just the grape growers' problem. It's everybody's problem. I mean, you saw the picture of the tree in the backyard. That's what we're all looking forward to when that gets here. And so we're just asking everybody kind of pull up their sleeves, do their part, help out where you can. And we have some wonderful new handouts. Cassie put them on all of your tables. Make sure you give that a good read over. But there are some basics here. Train your employees who work in the rail yards to recognize this pest and report it. We can actually probably stop it from getting here in super huge numbers by beating it back just a little and delaying its arrival if we know it gets here quickly. If we wait until it's a full-blown infestation, the odds are not good. The state of Ohio threw everything, the kitchen sink, and a few more things at it, and it is still marching across their state. They, however, have a very different ecological scenario than we do, and we might actually be able to, wipe out a small infestation of this if we're alerted quick enough. Recognize tree of heaven. I mean, that's the no-brainer here. So this is a, it has a light gray bark, compound leaves. When the leaves fall off, you get a heart-shaped scar. Most importantly with this one, if you break it in half and sniff it, it smells like burnt peanut butter. It's really gross. And if you are in vegetation management along the rail lines, you know this tree is a pain. This is a terrible tree. It should be called not tree of heaven, but the other one. So we definitely want to control this, but this is absolutely the preferred host. What you can do to help is prioritize tree of heaven removal in areas. You saw my map of all of our commodities, where your rail lines go, where we found tree of heaven. If you have vegetation management plans and you're going to be doing some work anyway, we're asking you, in places where cars sit that come from the East Coast, why don't you prioritize removing tree of heaven from those? That would help everybody. So that would be great. So that's a pretty easy ask. You're probably going to be doing that anyway. Just move it up the list a little. One important thing to remember is you can't just go and hack it off. If you cut tree of heaven off, you're going to get 500 saplings up the next year. You actually do need to hit it with an herbicide afterward. And so, just working on those vegetation management plans could be the biggest thing the rail industry could do to help us. And assist us. We need to do survey work. We can actually have an impact if we find it early. So make it a little easier for us to gain access. We do want to follow whatever rules you have, but work with us and don't bar us from doing the job we need to do to help protect the commodities here as well. And so granting access for survey and control work can really be, a huge thing for us and help us win this battle. And the last thing I'm going to ask for is, I know my bugs. You find a bug, you show it to me, I'll tell you all about it, I'll put you to sleep. I don't know the rail industry, so maybe you have some ideas that can help this from spreading. Somebody here was using a power washer. We're always open to partnering up and working with you to impact a positive change. And so if this is, if you've been thinking about this, or you saw the picture of the tree in the person's backyard and you think, I don't want this in my yard, and you have a good idea, get a hold of one of us. Who knows? Maybe we can work together, and maybe you'll be the one who figures out how to stop this. And I'm going to call it a scourge, because I've lived through it in the East Coast. I'm not looking forward to living through it again, but it is coming, and it's coming probably sooner than we think. And with that, I'll say thank you, and hopefully I'm on time.
You're perfect.
Great. This is nice.
Oh, wow. Hi, good morning, everyone. I just want to say really quickly, thank you, Sven, for that. Hopefully that gave you more the information than you're probably going to be able to absorb. My speech will be a little bit less on the technical side, but hopefully that gave you a really good foundation. So I'm going to try not to repeat too much information. I will say that I will be co-tagging this presentation with Cody here, so we'll be switching on and off and covering different material here. So Sven kind of touched on this. So at risk of belaboring the point, just again, any presentation you may come across about spotted lanternfly, you're probably going to hear the same things over and over and over again. Oregon by no means is the top grape producer, but it is definitely one of those commodities that we are very concerned about. Again, looking to the east and seeing the impacts that they've had to their grape industry there. Hops, again, we're not the biggest player on the team when it comes to hop production, but at least within the Willamette Valley, it is a significant crop that we are producing here. The big one for Oregon is our nursery stock and our Christmas trees. We are the nurseries are the number one commodity in Oregon, valued at about $1.3 billion annually. We're the third Christmas tree producer in the country. So these are really the things that I think in Oregon we are particularly concerned about. Sven touched on the quality of life as being another issue that's going to impact all of us when this passes. And again, I see when, because it's not a matter of if, it is a matter of when it will come into Oregon. And one thing that maybe Sven didn't touch on is that whenever we're talking about invasive species, whether it's an invasive plant, an invasive insect, an invasive pathogen, we are talking about the increased use of pesticides, the increased use of herbicides, which ultimately is going to impact our environment. So that is something that we also try to message when we have these opportunities. And one thing I also want to highlight, not when it comes to talking about things like grapes, hops, nursery stock, we're not just talking about the value of those commodities and, you know, those plants not being able to thrive. There is also the immediate economic impact to those industries, to the growers who are producing those crops, because if they can't sell those crops, those are product losses. They're subject to regulatory restrictions. They have to be the ones to pay for the increase in costs of the pesticides and other phytosanitary measures that will be required in order for them to meet export market requirements. And so as a Department of Agriculture, that is also something that we're tackling with.
Thanks. And as Sven already mentioned as well, the rail is obviously a point of real friction for us that we're worried about. There's a lot of risk for it coming into the state. And so we've tried to work really hard, as Washington has, to understand, you know, what is going on around our rail here in Oregon. And so if you look closely at the map here, you can see some green dots. That's actually where our noxious weed program and our insect program here at Oregon Department of Agriculture have worked really hard to get a huge data set together of where are we seeing tree of heaven, this major host for this species. Where is this plant? Where is it occurring? And again, we have these hot spots showing up, and obviously there's some bias here. There's access points near roads and rail where people can actually get data. You can't exactly get data in the middle of nowhere very easily. But that said, there are some real hotspots along some of these major rail corridors and thoroughfares. And because Tree of Heaven is right next to these rails where trains sit for a while, there's this interaction that Sven already described, where you can have a train car come in that has egg masses all over it from, say, Pennsylvania. It sits next to these Tree of Heaven and, say, maybe the Dalles or somewhere else that we have a hotspot along some of these major corridors. And all of a sudden those egg masses hatch. Nymphs jump off the train onto the Tree of Heaven, which is planted or happens to be growing right next to these rails. And then you get a nice incipient population building from there. That's what we're really concerned about happening, and we really want to stop from happening. And we've heard that steel plates and, like Sven already mentioned, stone can be a major propagator. So that's maybe some commodities that you can look into specifically and keep an eye out for, egg masses on those large plates or large flat rocks and other surfaces. And so, you know, what we've been doing to kind of mitigate some of those incoming risks from other states is to do nursery surveys. So we're looking at nursery stock. We're doing rail surveys. So we've actually done some pretty intensive railway surveys. Thank you to BNSF for allowing us to do some of that work here around the Port of Portland and several other major rail yards. Really appreciate that partnership. We've done some college campus surveys where we looked at, looking at major shipping containers or just getting outreach materials out to students, because we know a lot of students are coming in from other states. We've looked at fruit industry, orchards, grape vineyards, trying to get the word out to them, and also doing visual surveying of their properties as well, just to see, again, is there anything coming in? Can we be on it with that? And we've also been responding to public reports as well, because people are observant, and there's a lot of new applications out there that they can submit data. And so that's become like a part-time job for us, is trying to follow up on those reports. And I'll let Chris talk about interception here.
All right, there may be a delay in this slide there, but that's okay. So just really quickly going over some of the experience that we've had with SLF over the past several years. Kind of 2020 was our first incident where we were intercepting, I think actually on 2 separate shipments, dead spotted lanternfly that had originated, the shipments that originated in Pennsylvania had come into nurseries within the Willamette Valley. Again, we didn't find any egg masses, no adults, but this was like a first red flag to kind of give us a wake up call to say, like, okay, this is happening, and the time is now that we need to start raising the alarm, getting the awareness, in this case of the nursery industry specifically, that they need to be on the lookout and on guard when they're receiving shipments from the infested states. images aren't working, but rail car is another one. So in December of 2023, during one of those rail surveys that Cody just mentioned, one of our inspectors, eagle-eyed as she was, she actually found an egg mass on rusted metal up on top of one of the rail cars. So that was also definitely a big alarm for us, because up to now we had only been intercepting, dead specimens, had to never find anything that was actually live and viable. Glad this picture came up. So this is a picture of the egg mass that we were able to recover, and we really got a really nice close-up shot there for you. So the gray whitish is the egg mass itself, the kind of brown stuff around it, that's the rusted metal. So again, we see an egg mass, we're seeing it on rusted metal. And keep in mind that this was someplace not really visible. This was way up there, and it was almost just a chance that our inspector was able to find this. And I want to point out that this was a viable egg mass. We found this rail car in winter. So I think Sven had mentioned in the life cycle, these egg masses are being typically laid in October. So that means a rail car had been somewhere else in an infested state, somewhere on the other side of the country. A female had landed, laid an egg. That was happening in the fall. Fast forward 2 or 3 months later, we're finding the egg mass here in Oregon and the Dalles. And we took that egg mass, carefully collected it, brought it back to our lab, and Cody's team, they actually reared it out. And you'll see in the upper right-hand corner, that's a tiny little baby SLF. So this was a viable egg mass. So again, we were able to detect this, intercept it early, which was amazing. But that's just the one out of how many millions of chances that we have an opportunity to do that. Just really quickly, this past last year, again, another dead adult interception at a construction site in Beaverton. Again, an indication of materials coming interstate, likely across country from infested states. And as a result of the college campus survey that we had done, finding dead adults on the University of Oregon campus. Again, just giving us more data to verify the movement of materials across state lines from infested states into our uninfested West is a risk.
And I mentioned public reports earlier, but as I said, they are helpful. We had one come in this May 2025 where somebody noted that in Portland at Colonel Summers Park, which is not far away, they had seen it. And this is the actual picture they took. They claimed this is on their blanket in the park there, just under one of the London plane trees by the tennis courts. And again, we were alerted to this report, and just 2 days later, went out and took a look. But we had to put in a lot of time and effort to get after this. We went and confirmed that the image was taken in the Portland area by this person. We called them and talked to them. We verified the image was their original image and not some kind of AI generation or, something they'd copied from someone else. And so we worked really hard with Washington State Department of Agriculture, as well as our federal partners at USDA, APHIS, PPQ, to do a bunch of surveys this summer. We went back every 2 weeks, the first 2 months there in May and June, and then in July and August, we went back once each of those months to do pretty large scale visual surveys around the surrounding neighborhood. We were not able to find anything. We put out a big press release, tried to get more information coming in from the public, and it was pretty much radio silence on our account, and we received no other reports. So we assumed that it was either a report that was maybe misinformed. We're not sure if this person could have been honest. They could have been dishonest. And then we also assumed that if it was an honest report and it was a nymph, that it either died out, or we have yet to see where it has propagated and persisted. We're choosing to believe and having faith right now that it was a near miss and that we are hopefully in the free once again. But it has instigated, again, like I said, us being really diligent. And so we went to that park, we set up visual surveys, we set up some prototype traps, some posters. If anybody's interested here in putting posters up at your workstation, you want people to get better at identifying this insect, we have some great outreach materials. Get in touch with me. And then this is just some pictures of us going around a 10 by 10 block square around Colonel Summers Park to do the visual surveys where we confirmed it was not there. And if you do happen to, see something that you are suspicious of and you say, that looks like what that weird nerdy guy was talking about, go to the Oregon Invasive Species Hotline, just Google that, and you'll have the opportunity to put images there and put your report and say, hey, this looks like potentially spotted lanternfly. What do you think? And within 24 hours, one of our 6 entomologists will have the chance to usually get in there and respond to you. So we highly recommend you do that.
Also, I'll put in a quick plug. The Oregon Invasive Species Council is recruiting for someone from the industry, any industry member, to be a voting member of the council. So if anyone is interested to learn more about the OASC, please reach out to me. Anyways, future goals really quick, 'cause I know we're running over time. Kind of a big theme that you'll hear all of us is we are seeking cooperative relationships with industry, specifically you all. I think hopefully after all of our talks, you walk away with a better understanding of how your industry is really tied to the success or not the success of how we can respond to SLF once it arrives in Oregon. So again, like Sven mentioned, granting us access when we need access to rail lines, treating Tree of Heaven, any of those things that Sven mentioned really do make a difference. So we're eager, ready, waiting to partner with you. Like Washington, we are creating our own action plan here in Oregon. We're not recreating the wheel. Pretty much wherever you are in the country, you're going to be doing more or less the same thing, but we do need to do something a little bit more specific to Oregon. So we're currently working on tailoring that. And I'll skip over the last point because it's not really that important. Anyways, thank you for your time. And again, feel free to reach out. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Okay, one more presenter joining us remotely. Are we good to go on that, on the technical from California, so we can get a little more perspective, and then we'll switch gears for the last part of this panel today.
Yeah, hi, I'm Joshua Kress. I requested sharing, so we'll see it. It looks like I should be able to share. So give me just a second to bring it up.
Welcome, Joshua from California.
Thank you. All right, hopefully y'all can hear me and see me and can see my presentation. Appreciate the opportunity to attend virtually. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with my colleagues from Washington, Oregon, but happy to participate and kind of give you a bit of a perspective on California perspective on spotted lanternfly. And I'll probably skip over a good chunk of this because I don't want to be too repetitive. As Chris and Sven have already mentioned, we're all kind of in the same boat here dealing with the same thing. So I will, like I said, I'll skip over these first couple slides that we're just kind of here for reference. But as was always already mentioned, one of the main concerns for spotted lanternfly is grapes. Spotted lanternfly feeds upon, as was mentioned already, a huge variety of plants, many of which are grown commercially in California. But the commodity that we're most concerned with is grapes. I'm sure you already are all familiar with California generally, but California is one of the largest agricultural producers in the world, with about 400 different agricultural commodities, over 500,000 farm workers, and we produce over 60% of U.S. fresh fruits and vegetables. And a big part of that is our grapevine industry. Grape is a preferred host to spotted lanternfly. It's one of California's top crops, as you can see there, with a crop value of about $5.6 billion in 2024, and an estimated economic activity from a few years ago just related to wine grapes of $88 billion, which would include things like ag tourism, shippers, processors, exports, etc. California produces about 90% of U.S. wine grapes, over 95% of U.S. table grapes, and 100% of U.S. raisins. So obviously, a pest that is of concern to grapes is of significant concern to California, in addition to all the other crops that have already been mentioned. And again, I won't spend too much time on this slide, as Sven has already kind of gone over some of the impacts here. But as he mentioned, one of the main concerns here is that the peak feeding time for spotted lanternfly is near or at harvest, which can have severe impacts on the ability to conduct treatments and can have severe impacts on the grape production itself. So this is a map of the potential distribution of spotted lanternfly from a few years ago. As you can see, within California, where we're concerned is that the high susceptible area is California's Central Valley, which is the primary ag production in the state, as well as the coastal areas, which are where the vast majority of the wine grapes are grown. So spotted lanternfly is likely, California is likely a very suitable destination for spotted lanternfly. In addition to this, CDFA has also partnered with USDA to determine if spotted lanternfly could establish at some specific locations in the Central Valley and Napa Valley using site-specific criteria. And all the analyses supported the potential establishment and potential for widespread establishment in those areas. And then CDFA has also partnered with the Helmus Lab at Temple University to better understand the risk of introductions and pathways, potential hotspots, so we can refine our surveys that we conduct for SLF, as well as better assess the transport corridors. So some of the things that California has done with regards to SLF at this point, we have declared it an A-rated pest, which means it's subject to quarantine action. That was done in 2015 after the initial introductions. And then we have had a state exterior quarantine for California since 2021 that regulates the movement of spotted lanternfly and various articles coming into the state. The map that you'll see there is the quarantined area. Now you'll note that we quarantine entire states. That just because the state is highlighted doesn't mean that the entire state is generally infested. It just means that spotted lanternfly is present there. Any vehicles or outdoor articles that are entering California from infested states are inspected coming into California. California is a little unique that we have border protection stations on 16 of the major highways coming into the state. And so our staff conduct inspections and confirm quarantine compliance for regulated articles coming into California. And that would include checking for spotted lanternfly, as well as spongy moth egg masses. We've been looking for egg masses on outdoor articles for many, many years because of spongy moth. And so we've expanded that to include looking for spotted lanternfly as well. And then CDFA, we also, because of Japanese beetle, we conduct inspections on incoming cargo planes coming in from Japanese beetle infested areas. And a few years ago, we expanded that out to also look for spotted lanternfly during those inspections. These are just some images of some of the inspections conducted by our team. Again, coming into California through our border protection station on the top left, I believe that's in Blythe on Interstate 10. Inspection of parcels by dog teams, conducting cargo plane inspections, as well as doing additional inspections for spotted lanternfly in different situations. And again, just some images of staff looking for and finding spotted lanternfly egg masses. So at this point, here are the numbers of spotted lanternfly interceptions that we've had in California since 2019. These are the actual number of specimens that have been submitted and identified by our laboratory. So on the aircraft inspections, there have been 136 adults that have been found during those cargo aircraft inspections. At the border protection stations, we've had a total of 76 specimens collected and identified by our lab. The 74 egg masses that are noted there at the border, those are from a total of 11 different interceptions. So again, each of those had multiple egg masses. For the other that are at the bottom, 16 of those were a follow-up inspection at destination. So as you can see on the top left-hand corner there, there's a large piece of, it's actually outdoor artwork that was intercepted at a station. They intercepted egg masses, they removed the egg masses at the station, sent it out of state for cleaning, re-inspected, did not have any additional finds, and then sent it to destination. At destination, it was unloaded and inspected again, where they found an additional 16 egg masses. And working with our local county agricultural commissioner, we're able to do a complete 100% inspection of the very, very large piece of outdoor artwork to ensure that there were no egg masses on it. But again, as was already mentioned, the egg masses can be in places that are pretty hard to get to, pretty hard to see. And then as far as the aircraft inspections, nearly all of those were dead or moribund. And aircraft is not a likely pathway for adult SLF, but it is a potential pathway, and it is something we continue to look at. So some other things that CDFA has been working on. So we've got an action plan for spotted lanternfly that we published in 2023 that includes our operational response. We also convened a science advisory panel in 2021 with 11 experts from USDA, University of California, as well as Penn State University to assist us with developing that action plan, as well as our current survey and response activities. We have a proposed state interior quarantine ready to go. So that way, if we do have an introduction, we'll be able to implement that as part of our action plan to try to take action and hopefully contain and eradicate spotted lanternfly upon introduction. And then one of the things that's a new effort that we're working on is we're working on a tabletop exercise for early 2026, where we're going to take various scenarios of potential introduction sites and work with CDFA and other local agencies to take a look at each of those scenarios and kind of run through our action plan and try to find holes and try to really narrow down that plan to make sure that we are ready for potential introduction. We have a survey that we've been conducting for SLF at high-risk sites since 2020. Primarily we are looking at Tree of Heaven, which, as was already noted, is widely present in the state, as well as alternative hosts, primarily grapevines, where they're visually inspected between July and October. And again, those locations are selected based on mathematical modeling from the lab that's led by Matt Helmus at Temple University. And so far, we've had, fortunately, 0 finds of spotted lanternfly. And then again, as Oregon and Washington are also doing, we also do follow up on reports from the public, whether that's via iNaturalist or via CDFA's own Report a Pest hotline, where we get reports of pests. This is an image of the sites that have been surveyed. As you can see, they're pretty well spread out throughout California in a wide range of counties and locations. And then we have done very quickly some partnership with rail at this point. So one of the things we've worked on is to identify rail yards that receive a high volume of rail cars from the eastern US. In just outside of the Sacramento area in Roseville, we have the largest rail yard west of the Rockies. And so CDFA and the Placer County Agricultural Commissioner coordinated with UP to visit that rail yard in April of 2023. And then Placer County with UP have coordinated on the removal of Tree of Heaven from that rail yard and have continued to coordinate and partner on that moving forward. And so we are looking to continue to expand those partnerships. We do have other rail yards within California that we are looking to try to conduct inspections and additional activities, and as well as gain additional information from our partners in rail. And just noting a few of our different partnerships, this has been a large multi-agency effort across the board for California. And I think I'm out of time, so just appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you, Joshua. Thank you to our panel on this subject that I had no idea about until the briefing about this panel. So I'm sure all of you will have some questions. Talk to them after this too, because this is something you wouldn't typically think a rail caucus or a rail summit would be talking about, but now you can see the integration, how important this is as an awareness piece to help stop this. I mean, it is critical. We talk about supply chain and everything else, that this particular piece is being addressed. So I do appreciate the information and I appreciate all the work that you're doing on behalf of the agricultural industry and the people of our states. Okay, we're going to switch gears here. Matt is on. Fantastic. Our technology is working. Matt is going to talk to us about something that I believe Bruce is now back in there. He's super excited about, and so is Penwar, because we've been talking about this cooperation of using rail right-of-ways with our private partnerships on some pretty amazing projects. And I think you're going to hear this presentation that is going to explain just one concept that is being done right now. Matt, welcome.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me on your end and see the screen? Good. All right. Perfect. Apologies, not able to join you in person today. Home recovering from knee surgery, so this will be the first conference I presented at sitting from my couch here. So we'll see how this goes. I know we're a little pressed for time, so I'm going to try to get through some of these slides a little bit quicker. I'm also sitting here in Pennsylvania, which I did not realize is the hotbed for the spotted lanternfly. So maybe a good thing I didn't travel west and kept those home with me. I'm going to touch on the Champlain Hudson Power Express project here, give a quick overview of the project itself, what it is, and how it relates to the rail industry and how the rail corridors played a vital part to this construction. So the project itself is a hydroelectric power transmission project. So it's bringing clean hydroelectric power from Canada, in Quebec down to New York City. It is about 340 miles worth of transmission. It's two 5-inch HVDC, so that's high voltage direct current transmission cables, not the traditional AC transmission overhead aerial lines that you see. This is a completely underground direct current transmission that is coming from, like I said, Canada down to New York City, where it will meet up in Astoria, Queens, with a converter station, which will convert it to AC power and then tie into the power grid there for the New York City boroughs. The cable itself will bring 1,250 megawatts of low-cost renewable power into New York City from a kind of a benefit standpoint on both the environmental side and for the power provider. Each year this cable is in operation, it's expected to remove 3.9 million metric tons of carbon reduction. And then with the line being underground, it's able to provide kind of reliable service here that's not impacted by some of the extreme weather events we see in the eastern half of the U.S., especially in upstate New York, with the potential for nor'easters, hurricanes, blizzards, flooding. So by providing this power underground, the transmission can kind of stay out of the path of destruction there that some of the traditional overhead transmission lines fall to. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see essentially the route map for the project itself. It's broken into two parts. So the areas in blue are the marine section. This is everywhere where the cable is actually laid in waterways for transmission. And then the green section is what they refer to as the terrestrial section. So this is where the cable comes up onto land. A lot of it is routed through the rail corridors themselves. So you'll see the segment here through CP and the segment through CSX. The rail corridors made a suitable partner here, able to provide kind of long longitudinal corridors where they were able to put the cable in without much disruption to the surrounding communities. So let me jump over. Today we're going to kind of drill into the CP section, as that was the segment that AECOM was involved with managing the engineering and construction for CP and protecting their interests as the developer was working to design and install the cable. So on the CP segment, we had 57 miles of cable that were installed. A lot of it was done by traditional trenching methods. So those generated roughly over 150,000 cubic yards of spoils. Additionally, different segments of the cable were installed by individual horizontal directional drilling methods. So we had 64 locations where the cable was installed by HDD. On the right, you'll see the cable spool here. This is one of the sections of the cable. And due to limitations in the cable's length, you had to ultimately wind up splicing the cable roughly on the range of 2,500 to about a mile. The cable length would be, and that had to do with both its depth in the ground and the angle and cable bend. So on the engineering side, the developer had to go through a lot of exercises to precisely lay out that cable length. So that led to 108 splice vaults that need to be constructed on the property. There was roughly 87 culverts on the railroad corridor there that were impacted by the project. It generated over 1,000 construction work plan submittals for the various activities that were occurring out there that needed to be reviewed and coordinated to make sure that the work could be performed without impacts to the railroad operations. And then kind of the big one here on the coordination side, during the height of construction, so essentially mostly through 2024, there was 65 full-time railroad flaggers out there protecting the job site, moving trains safely and keeping the crews safe from train operations. So that included 55 subcontracted third-party flaggers. There were 10 full-time flaggers from CP, as well as 4 additional full-time supervisors. So The manpower needed just from a protection standpoint alone is enormous on a project like this. Just to touch base a little bit on some of the engineering design overview and some of the things we considered when looking at the cable alignment initially. Unfortunately, on this project, the railroad was brought in kind of later than they would prefer. So the original alignment that was presented to the railroad presented a lot of issues and areas of impact that we had to quickly work with the developer on adjusting their alignment to a location that would allow them to construct it without impacts from the railroad, and then also allow it to be constructed without impacting the railroad infrastructure as well as the train operations. So I got a section here that represents a couple of different items that are constructed out there. You'll see the right-of-way lines here for the railroad, and then the cable alignment down here with the stationing on it. The original alignment the developer submitted had most of the cable alignment located at roughly 15 feet from the center line of track. That presented a lot of issues. One, working that close to the track and fouling the track presents the need for even more protection, flagging protection, stoppage of work, removal of equipment to allow trains to pass, designing of shoring to support railroad loading, temporary shoring, and then impacts to railroad drainage and other co-located infrastructure that was there. So one of the first things we did was work with the developer to get the alignment pushed further to almost the extent of the right-of-way, so that we could create a scenario where it would limit those impacts to the rail operations, and also provide the contractor with a better working condition where, the further they could work away from the tracks, the better their operation would be able to proceed. Early on, we did look at some of kind of the traditional things that you deal with long transmission projects and rail corridors. So inductive interference studies, not as much of a concern here on the DC transmission as what we see on an AC transmission, where those overhead AC transmissions have the ability to interfere with railroad signals and communications that are often run through the corridor and also along the rail itself. We also looked at the cable from a safety standpoint. What would happen, in areas where it is close to the track if you had a derailment and the train was to derail and dig into the ground and potentially sever the cable. There were some initial concerns of potential risk of explosion or electrocution there, but working with the transmission developer, going through different studies, they were able to basically satisfy the railroad on that the potential for catastrophe did not exist due to the method of transmission. And then the last part of it was, you'll see here the shaded area, which was used as a construction access road. This corridor used to be a two-track corridor for the railroad. So the railroads often would like to protect their ability to either put that second track back in or use that area for siding capacity, depending on what future carload movements may be through that area. So looking at the trench itself for railroad loading in the future, and the cable itself, if you were to restore a second track through that area or a siding track, making sure that cable alignment was such that it wouldn't be impacted by railroad loading. So the three things I got here on the screen is looking at different various installation methods. You'll see here on the right, dig lay backfill area. This is installation by traditional trenching methods. I've got an example of the typical trench section here. You'll see the 5-inch cable inside of an 8-inch conduit. There's a 2-inch fiber duct as well that's used for communications. Essentially, if there is a short or damage to the cable, the user is immediately identified of the issue there, and service can be cut. But the big thing to note is this fluidized thermal backfill. Because of the thermal properties of the cable, they were not able to just put the excavated material back into the hole. They had to utilize a special thermal backfill, essentially a kind of low strength 2000 PSI flow fill concrete. that took up much of this trench section. It's kind of why we wound up with large amount of spoil material that needed to be handled on part of the project here. A lot of it was either taken off-site for disposal, or there was a location that was identified on CP property where they were able to kind of create a mass spoil pile and keep that material that originated from the railroad property on the railroad property. The second part of installation, we talked about HDDs, the horizontal directional drill. Anywhere we had that, the cable alignment would split off. When not in a shared duct, the cable had to be separated by at least 15 feet, again, because of its thermal properties. HDD areas create a larger work zone needed to set up the drilling equipment that comes along with that operation. So working to find areas where they could perform HDDs. A lot of times these were used, you'll see off to the left here, there was a highway crossing that they needed to get under. So a lot of large roadway crossing, river crossings, HDDs were used. And then also to transition the alignment from one side of the track to the other. So because of the topography through the area, we were up in the Catskill mountain area, so we were often working either down in a cut or up an embankment, and the terrain would kind of dictate which was the best side of the track to be on. So anytime we had a cable crossing of the track to get from one side to the other, it was done by an HDD. And the last one here on the screen is the splice vault. You said the cable had restrictions on its length, so we had to install these splice vaults, 108 of them throughout the project. These are roughly 15 feet wide by 75 feet long. Again, a large footprint here with potential impacts to rail infrastructure due to the excavation needed to install these vaults. So let's run through kind of some of the concerns here on the construction side and some of the benefits to the railroad, and just kind of walk through the process here quickly. So first was clearing and grubbing. Large amount of trees needed to be cleared in order to build the access roads and get to the preferred cable alignment areas. From the railroad perspective, you know, as this two-track corridor over the years has slowly kind of grown back in, you get a lot of the tree and forest area growing back into the track, so you have the potential for trees falling onto the track during weather events and clearing. So through this project, a lot of the 55 miles of this corridor now are more wide open for the railroad, reducing impacts from Mother Nature here with future events. And then also uncovered a lot of areas where drainage may have been covered up, filled in, or culverts that were heavily vegetated were now cleared out and kind of able to be restored to working order. Next up was access road construction, two types of access roads. One here you'll see on the left-hand side where we were on the former track bed section. It was currently being used as an access road by the railroad, mainly pickup trucks, you know, signal maintainers, et cetera, are using it. So not in any condition to handle the types of heavy construction equipment that would be running through the corridor. So contractor was able to come in a lot of areas and improve the condition of the access road, reinforced stone with geotextiles here to improve the condition of it. A lot of these roads here on the left will remain in place post-construction, but the big concern with them was, you know, making sure that they were installed without impacting any of the current drainage conditions and patterns that existed for the railroad to keep the track bed free draining. And then the other type of access road, a lot of timber mat construction, working through wetlands and other areas where we're off away from this established second track bed. So timber mats were used extensively throughout the project for the contractor to temporarily get access to the areas to construct the cable. And then most of these mats have already been removed as restoration is in progress, and all of them will be removed by the end of the project. All right. One thing I touched on here a little bit, and one of the big concerns for the railroad is obviously drainage. You know, the whole track infrastructure relies on making sure that water moves away from the track bed area and that we're able to get water to flow from one side of the track to the other. Throughout this project corridor, CP runs parallel to the Champlain Canal. Most of the water in the area is flowing downhill towards the track and then to the canal on the other side of the track. So drainage and culvert impacts were crucial here. Much of the existing infrastructure was well beyond its design life. The photo you see here is one of those culverts that is over 100 years old. Like I said, a lot of it was buried before the clearing operations, and you can see most of that culvert invert has been filled in with sediment over the years, and the water level is essentially at the top of the culvert, even though we're not in a heavy rain event at the time. So on the engineering side, we worked through a process of looking at all the 80 plus culverts and working with the contractor to put the alignment such that it would not impact CP's ability to replace culverts in the future. So we looked at either one, pushing them far enough away from the end of the existing culvert. So if we were able to get the alignment over 50 feet away from the end of the culvert, the contractor could use the typical trench section. There were a good number of areas where that wasn't possible due to the topography or other constraints or property constraints. So where we couldn't get 50 feet, we came up with a criteria of pushing that the cable depth to where it was 6 feet below the invert of the existing culvert, and that would be run out for a distance of 10 plus feet on either side, essentially allowing CP to come back in the future to jack a pipe adjacent to an existing culvert and not worry about having to go through the cable or the trench flow fill itself. With that, there were various locations where that either wasn't feasible or it was quicker for the contractor to essentially install a new culvert for CP and then put their cable alignment at the depth that they preferred in their design. So we had various culvert locations throughout the project where CP was actually able to get upgraded or replaced culverts. A lot of areas where 12-inch or 24-inch culverts were upgraded to 36-inch steel culverts, or existing 36 inches were replaced in kind. So as one of the benefits to the railroad working with the utility developer, we were able to get drainage improvements throughout the corridor, which also led to them being able to kind of maximize their construction schedule and not have to dig the cable depth deeper, because those deeper depths presented a lot of issues for them with shoring and dewatering, et cetera, that would slow down their production rate. All right, next thing here is the HDD installations. So we talked about this as one of the methods there, and seems to be one of the, from a railroad perspective, one of the lesser impactful of the two between trenching. Obviously, from the contractor side, there's a more of an expense associated with using the HDD methods, but we got into certain areas where there was no other alternative. A lot of times we tried to push the work area further away from the track so that they could set up and have their rig in an area where it would not impact train operations. Image here on the left is one of the receiving ends. So the drill is actually on the other side of this. This is where the conduit is coming out of the ground after they drill, and they'll pull the conduit back through. So as much as we tried to move them far away, there were some areas where we did have to work in close to the track and coordinate that work and make sure everybody was aware of equipment locations and where to clear up when trains were moving. The other area of concern with HDDs was the footprint needed. So some of these HDDs would range in length from 500 feet to 3,000 feet. So having a laydown area along the access road where they could fuse the pipe together in one complete section, so they could do a continuous pull back through the entry section. Working on these laydown areas, a lot of times, again, trying to push them away from the track, but sometimes we did not have the ability to do that. Coordinating that work with the contractor and the flagman to ensure that we're not fusing pipe together and having it sit out there for a month or two before they install it, because we do want to keep this area open for train crews. If they've got to walk or inspect a train, we want to try to eliminate tripping hazards, et cetera. So close coordination was needed on the HDDs to make sure that they were staged and that the fusing operations were set up so that they could be less impactful to the train operations. Even with that, we still ran into some issues on the HDD side. The photos here on the left, the two here, show instances where we did have cutting fluid or frac outs, where cutting fluid did come out of the drill hole, either found soft soils or a path where it got out of the drill path, and ultimately wound up leading to cutting fluid releases into the track bed section. Most of these were visually observed. One of the reasons we did not allow HDD drilling at night is so that we could visually observe if there were any frac outs. These areas have been temporarily cleaned up, and at the end of the project, the ballast section here will be replaced, because as these cutting fluids get into the track ballast section, they will lock up the ballast's ability to be free draining, and that's important for us to maintain good track bed structure there. The other concern with it on the right was sinkhole. So as we got closer to either the entry or exit pits, there were some instances where we had sinkholes that would open up. A lot of times, this is why we tried to push the entry and exit pits further away from the track so that we could control not having sinkholes occur in and around the track bed area. We also had track monitoring to monitor the elevation of the track during all the drilling operations. And fortunately for us, the sinkholes wound up being a minor impact of all the 60 plus HDDs that were installed. We did not have any movement on the track side. So that was definitely a positive here on the HDDs, that we were able to get the drilling done, complete it, and make sure that anytime we had a track crossing, that we had an appropriate depth to where sinkholes or settlement would not propagate up to the track bed structure itself. Quickly, I'll just run through some of these photos on the dig lay backfill, just to give you an idea of that process here. So a lot of it was completed using shoring boxes, where they were able to install the shoring, excavate, then come in and lay the conduits in, and then backfill with the fluid, the thermodized fluid backfill. So here you'll see the concrete truck basically placing that backfill, and then the excavator pulling the trench boxes as they vibrate that flow fill down. The work was a bit of an assembly line, so as they worked in essentially 300-foot long segments, it would be a steady parade of dump trucks taking spoils away, and then concrete trucks, following behind, placing the backfill. So coordinating those movements was definitely an area of concern, and one of the reasons we wanted to push the alignment further away from the track, because a lot of times the dump truck operators, the concrete truck operators are coming in and out of the project site temporarily. They're not working there every day. They might not be familiar with the site. So we typically see a lot of the incidents we run into from a safety standpoint occur with those equipment, and not the full-time operators and the excavators or the cranes that are on site. So in these photos, you'll see some of this yellow fencing. This was one of the means that we put in to kind of delineate the work zone. So anywhere where we're able to get the work zone greater than 15 feet away from the center line of track, we're able to install this visual barrier, left openings in it every 100 feet in case train crews need to get in or out from the track side. But this allowed the crews and the truck drivers to come through here with less flagging protection.
Matt, can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Matt,
Yep.
We are all enthralled by this is a fantastic presentation, but unfortunately we are on a hard stop, and we've passed that a little bit. I wanted to have a little bit of time for a couple questions, but I don't know if you've got like one or two things, or you can quickly wrap up, but we got to.
Nah, we can cut it there. That's all right.
Fantastic.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Well, Matt, we appreciate you joining us today. It's a huge, complicated project, and as you can see, the integration between our rail networks, our corridors that we have, the infrastructure that we are going to need for power transmission, et cetera. This is not a new thing. When fiber optic first came out, a lot of the fiber optic cables were laid along rail right-of-way in cooperation with the rail network throughout our country. So huge thing. Thank you very much, Matt, for joining us. Yes, absolutely. And if you're still on, we hope that your recovery is going well, whatever your situation was, and that the couch is comfortable. And don't bring those bugs to Washington. I think we're up on time. So here's what I'd like to do. We had some really great presentations. Thrilled about what's going on with BNSF working on our fish culverts and a lot of conservation work. It's interesting to know that that is in conjunction with a lot of culvert work that we're doing in WashDOT and in the legislature in Washington State. Very interesting information about the spotted lanternfly. This is information that each one of us in this room now has an obligation, right? We now have to look for this thing and we have to report it when we see it, and we got to tell more people about it. And I was thinking about a walk I was taking on the Chehalis Western Trail around Tenino, and those trees are all over the place. And guess what's right next to that? Sorry, BNSF, the rail line. So yeah, that tree is everywhere now that I know what to look for. So, but this is all really great information, and why these conferences are so important, because we are able to gather this knowledge, share this knowledge, and learn things that we might not have learned unless we were here. So again, for our panelists, let's all give them a great round of applause, and thank you so much.